For inviting me. Good evening, everybody. I know you've been very patient over the last couple of hours already. And one of the disadvantages of going last is you will have heard some of this, so there will be an element of repetition, but hopefully reinforcement as well. So I'm one of the founders of Greencore Homes, and this presentation will explain exactly what we do. But before we get into what we do, I think it's important to look at the context. We are in a climate emergency, and this quote from David Attenborough, I think, really sums it up. What we do in the next 10 years will profoundly impact the next few thousand. We are really in a decade of action. We need to change what we do, and for very good reasons, some of which you've heard from the inspirational talks we've had so far. I also wanted to look at the context of carbon budgets. So within this is purely Dorset. Um, Dorset has a combined carbon budget of 12.7 million tonnes, and that comes from the different districts before it became a unitary authority. And that carbon budget is to cover all aspects of life from now up until 2100. So another 75 years. So that's powering our existing buildings. That's the embodied carbon of our new buildings, powering our new buildings. It's agriculture, industry, transport, and everything else that happens in the district. So bear in mind, that's the budget we've got, 12.7 million tonnes. Um, we've been talking about a lot about zero carbon, but there, as we heard from Andrew, there isn't really a clear definition in building legislation. Um, the building regulations definition is about matching the heating, hot water, lighting, and ventilation with the renewable energy generated on the roof. But actually, that's only a fraction of the energy the house and the carbon emissions that the house might be responsible for. So the embodied carbon, the carbon emissions that come from the extraction, manufacture, transport, and assembly of the materials that go into the house are not included. And all the unregulated energy is not included. So that's the cooking, washing machines, tumble dryers, appliances, computers, all of those sorts of things are not included either in the calculation. So we're sort of kidding ourselves, and the industry is kidding the public that when they talk about zero carbon homes, the public quite rightly think that's all the carbon, but it's only actually a fraction of it. And then we find that most homes don't perform as well as they're predicted during the design phase. And that comes from all sorts of things like inaccurate modeling, material substitution, where an architect designs it to be built with a certain type of insulation, and the contractor finds something cheaper and puts it in there, and then poor site practices that lead to gaps in insulation and poor air tightness. And we don't actually monitor our buildings generally to find out whether they perform or not. And that's because the industry doesn't want the bad news. If you don't monitor what you do, then you can carry on kidding yourself that it's actually working when it's not. So the whole industry is a bit of a mess. Um, if we look at the carbon footprint of a house, so at the construction stage, a new house, and if we think of an average new house as say 100 square meters or just over 1,000 square feet, and with three bedrooms, say, that will be responsible for over 100 tons of carbon emissions at the construction stage from those materials that go into it. And that's often referred to as the carbon footprint or upfront carbon. And we heard a bit more detail about that earlier. And then if we do a half decent job of building a house, it will emit somewhere between 3 and 5 tons of carbon emissions each year in use. That's its operational emissions. So a new house that we build this year could easily be responsible for 200 tons of carbon dioxide emissions by 2050. And the new housing target for Dorset alone is 3,230 homes per year. So that's about 650,000 tons of emissions, either emitted directly or locked in through the operational emissions of the house each year. So within 20 years, we will have consumed the whole of Dorset's carbon budget just on new housing. That won't leave anything For the other 55 years, it won't leave anything for running our existing buildings, industry, agriculture, transport. So it's a very clear illustration, I think, that business as usual can't carry on. We will just burn through our carbon emissions literally and our carbon budgets far too fast. So, to tell you a little bit about Greencore, we set the company up in 2013 and we started slowly with single houses and moved on to smaller developments. We've done around 100 homes since we started, and we've delivered projects that have won quite a lot of awards, particularly Springfield Meadows. But 3 years ago, we brought a big investment asset manager called M&G on board as our major shareholder and also as a source of funding. So as a result of that, we've been able to build a very strong team and start to put plans in place for expansion. We've got around 500 homes on the go at the moment, so that's about 100 that are consented and either on site or just about to start on site. 200 that are going through the planning process, and another 200 that are going through the legal process behind that. We're based in Bicester, so I'm sorry I'm not down in Dorset with you. I do love Dorset as a county. Um, in Bicester, we've got an office and a factory where we manufacture what's known as MMC Type 2. So that's flat packed panels that go together on site to form a 3D house. And all of those are with bio-based materials. And we've got some pretty ambitious growth plans. So these are a couple of shots of the factory. Our building system that we produce there is called Beyond. It's a play on the word bio because it's all bio-based materials. So it's the structure is timber, the insulation is partly hemp and partly wood fiber, but it's all sequestering carbon. That's the carbon that was absorbed during the plants and trees during their growth cycle that's now locked up in the building system. So one way to reduce the carbon footprint of our housing is to use bio-based materials because they sequester this carbon. Um, so at Greencore, we are passionate about what we do. Our purpose is to accelerate the global transition to low carbon living. And our vision is to lead the house building industry by delivering 10,000 better than net zero homes by 2035. So we're on a pretty steep growth curve to go from the 100 that we've done so far to 10,000 by the end of 2035. But all the plans are in place to do that. You're probably bored rigid by now of targets and numbers and standards. And one of the problems in the industry is there are so many different standards and numbers. We think that LETI, the London Energy Transition Initiative, is really a good organization, and we follow an awful lot of what they say together with Passive House and some of the RICS methodology. So we aim for the superstructures of our houses to actually lock up more carbon than they emit through the carbon sequestration of those bio-based materials. We aim for the whole house to be less than 300 kilos of CO2 emissions per square meter at the construction stage. And if we include the sequestration, less than 200. Out of things we've built so far, the lowest we've achieved is 31 kilos per square meter. But all of the houses that we're modeling as standard houses going forward are at or around zero, or maybe even slightly below zero, in terms of their embodied carbon with sequestration. So it is possible to get to zero on the embodied carbon as well. And then we have a total energy use target of 35 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. We've heard targets of 40 and 60 and 80 talked about. These are very, very difficult targets to hit because they do include the unregulated energy use. So that's all the things over which the designer and the builder has no control, like washing machines and tumble dryers and computers and gaming stations and things. But the thing that we can control very well is the space heating standard. So we worked the Passive House target of 15 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. All of this leads to an EPC-A, and very much like the Baines initiative we heard, we aim to have 100% of the energy generated on the roofs of the houses, so that the solar panels generate at least as much energy each year as the houses use. But we've talked an awful lot about energy and carbon, but there's a lot more to placemaking than energy and carbon. So we work within Bioregional's One Planet Living framework, which focuses on wildlife, biodiversity, health, happiness. And I won't go into all the details, but there are 10 key bullet points on the framework that we work to. And if you're not familiar with it, I would suggest you go and look at Bioregional's One Planet Living framework. It's a great way to look at all the things that are important in developing homes and communities. These are some images of some of the buildings that the houses that we've produced over the last few years. This is Springfield Meadows. So the two houses in the foreground are private, and the two houses on the right-hand side, the pair of semi-detached houses, are affordable. This is also Springfield Meadows. You'll notice that we use a lot of timber in the external finishes, and that's because, again, it's another bio-based material that's sustainable and sequestering carbon into the buildings themselves. Um, this is a scheme we did with Hook Norton Community Land Trust while we've been talking about community land trusts. So this is a scheme of 12 affordable homes and a community centre in the north of Oxfordshire, designed by Charlie Luxton Design. And all of Springfield Meadows and Hook Norton is all being monitored to make sure we're getting the right levels of performance. So we can boil this down to a fairly simple formula. We tongue-in-cheek call it a secret formula, but actually we share it regularly in forums like this. So using bio-based materials to lock up carbon is number one. We work to the Passive House thermal standard. So that's insulation, high levels of insulation, designing out the thermal bridges, excellent levels of air tightness. We do work to the Passive House target, which is 0.6. One thing I would say is make sure you do an air tightness test before you cover things up. Don't wait until you get to the end of the build before doing it. Triple glazed windows and then heat recovery ventilation. We don't use fossil fuels or gas, so everything is electric. And then the PVs that we talked about to generate the electricity, batteries to store it, and again, distribute it via a smart microgrid. And most important of all is actually put in place a post-occupancy evaluation plan to see what works and what doesn't, so that you can carry on doing the things that do work and think about how you might change things that don't work. So if we think about the industry and how the industry can do better, from a site construction point of view, properly trained construction teams, skill levels and training levels on site are often not where they need to be. Emphasis on air tightness. If there's one single thing that's going to make your building more energy efficient, it's air tightness. And we have our own testing equipment. We have people in the business who are trained to use it. And so we do an air tightness test before we plasterboard anything. If you haven't got the air tightness that you're looking for at that stage, it's very easy to find the problem and correct it. Once the house is finished and everything's covered up, it's virtually impossible. And then strong quality assurance processes, things like checking you haven't got gaps in insulation and that everything's done as it should be. But we can also, I think, incentivize the industry through local and national initiatives. Stamp duty land tax, you'll be well aware, is a tax that's charged on buyers every time they buy a house, but it's at the moment related to the cost of the house. It's not related to the energy efficiency of the house. If new houses had a stamp duty tax that was on a sliding scale linked to energy efficiency, it would become more attractive to buy an energy efficient house, and therefore developers would start to build more energy efficient houses because they were more attractive for people to buy. And we could do exactly the same locally with the community infrastructure levy. It doesn't mean these taxes and levies would bring in less revenue. It just means that revenue would be directed and assembled in a different way. and it would have to be reviewed from time to time to make sure the budget's balanced. But it's amazing how quickly developers' habits would change if there were financial incentives like that. We're not currently working in Dorset or based in Dorset, but we're always keen to work with local authorities and people in areas who are like-minded. So there's nothing to stop us working in Dorset in the future if we can find appropriate projects. So for that to work for us, we're looking for sites that are sort of 50 to 500 homes with open-minded landowners who support the sort of things that we're doing. So if there happens to be anybody in the audience who'd like to talk later, we'd love to have a conversation. Um, and as this quote from Peter Drucker says, we believe the best way to predict the future is to create it. So I hope that sort of gives you a flavour of what we're trying to do. And I'll hand back now to Andrew for the panel discussion.